Welcome, everybody, to part 4 of the Pediatric Summit's 8-part webcast series. We have with us today Dr. Monika Buerger, coming from all the way from Idaho. She's been practicing for over 25 years, has been teaching for over 15, and works with a ton of doctors and students teaching neurodevelopment issues and pediatric chiropractic all around the world. We're honored to have her with us today. How are you doing, Dr. Buerger?
I'm great. Thank you for hanging out with me.
So let's switch this camera over to you. People don't want to see my face.
I don't know if they want to see mine either, but.
How's your weekend going? How are you doing today?
It's going great. I had an amazing online class this weekend with some amazing doctors. So we wrapped it up a couple hours ago, and they're a little brain fried, and I'm inspired. So that's good.
Good. Awesome. So our topic today is the windows to the nervous system. And I know that with children, well, your nervous system, obviously, as everyone knows, controls every part of your body, every cell, every tissue. So there are probably just as many windows to the nervous system as there are the way the nervous system controls and coordinates the body. So today we were going to go over a few of those and have your take on a few. Is that all right with you?
Sounds fantastic.
Awesome. So the first question I had was, let's see, neurodevelopment. You work a lot with children with neurodevelopment issues and even kids that are developing normally. What would you say is the biggest issue that children are up against in terms of proper neurodevelopment issues?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that we as practitioners and children being born now are up against is the stress axis. Now, that's no surprise. As chiropractors, we know that stress in any manner, chemical, physical, or emotional, are going to cause autonomic dysregulation. And autonomic dysregulation is going to cause undue stress to the nervous system. I think what we need to start looking at is looking at things from a little different angle. The scary part is that most children being born these days are being in a fight or flight status with adrenal compromise, actually. So a lot of the research is showing us that moms with high cortisol levels during pregnancy, the babies are being born with adrenal stress loads and high cortisol, which leads them to a dysregulation of the HPA axis, and also subjects them to higher stress responses later on in life. So I think one of the angles we need to look at is actually how can we change that scenario before the child's even conceived. So in chiropractic, there's a big push right now for pediatric chiropractic, which is amazing. We need to be treating the baby, hands down, from the get-go. But I think we now need to step back and say, okay, the biggest challenge we have is their stress on the HPA axis. How can we intervene and help them out before they're even born and before they're even conceived? And that's going to be going back to the mom and dad. And really now having a big push for the teenage population group and really educating parents of teens and teenagers the importance of chiropractic care, because it takes about 17 years of what we call translational information. Research we know now takes about 17 years for it to become mainstream. So if we have a teen, even a preteen, and we get them under care and we teach them the importance of regulating stress before they even conceive, the profound impact we can have on subsequent generations is huge. I think we need to look at not just treating the newborns, but treating them before they're even thought of.
Awesome. Yeah, I know that many chiropractors, even Dr. Kathy Colby, who's going to be on one of these webcasts soon, was going over, how to take care of pregnant moms, and she's really big in pregnancy, and how that affects the baby and the hormones during pregnancy and the neurology and the control, just in general, the whole lifelong chiropractic care is absolutely important.
Absolutely.
So,
we know that we know that moms, if you don't get adrenal glands under control, you don't get hormones under control, thyroid in particular, and the T4 hormone is essential in development of the frontal lobe. And many children with developmental delays and even with mental issues, we see that they have a deficit in the frontal lobe. And that's the executive functioning part of the brain, the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe dampens the limbic system. Yep. And when a person gets stuck in limbic system load, I call it limbic lock and load mode. The limbic system is our emotional center of our brain. When we get stuck there, we can't get out. So have you ever tried to reason with a child or a spouse or a significant other and so forth when they're stuck in that emotional state? Their reasoning has gone out the window and it's not going to happen. And that's what we're seeing so many of these kids now. And then they can't reason, they can't self-modulate, they can't learn. And this is one of the things that we're stuck in. So this T4 hormone, a thyroid hormone, is essential in proper neurodevelopment of that frontal lobe.
Absolutely. And talking about the frontal lobe suppressing the limbic, I know that has a lot to do with also retained primitive reflexes and stuff like that. Am I correct?
Yeah, and that kind of falls in line with some of the things we wanted to talk about today.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So as we were kind of talking about that frontal regulation and retain primitive reflexes, that a lot of people draws their mind over to developmental milestones and their development. We all know that these milestones are important, but why would you say that in particular keeping on track and making sure that these milestones are met are so important?
Great question. These developmental milestones, when we are, let's say, 3 months old, starting to bring our hands to midline, starting to roll over to our side, all of these developmental steps help to integrate these primitive reflexes. So the primitive reflexes they are primitive in nature, okay? They're survival based. If they don't integrate, they're always going to be part of the nervous system. However, at certain times during development, they should no longer be active. We should not be regulating from a primitive aspect. The higher, more sophisticated neurological centers, the spinal cord, the brainstem, the brain, need to take over. So during these milestones, that helps these reflexes to integrate so they don't stay active. So a child does not stay on a fight or flight mode. So rolling over in a corkscrew fashion, in a proper fashion. If they're subluxated, especially at 3 months in the pelvic region, at 3 months of age, we start rolling in a corkscrew fashion from the pelvis on up through the thoracics and then roll over. If we're subluxated, especially in the pelvic and the lumbar spine, the child might not be able to obtain that motion. And there's the what we call the spinal galant reflex that is important to integrate during that motion. If these reflexes stay active, the sensory systems are immature, and that can lead right into neurosensory dysfunction or sensory motor dysfunction.
For sure. So as chiropractors, we just based on the way that we see our patients, we see children a lot more frequently than, let's say, their pediatrician. So it's almost our job to make sure we monitor and know how these babies are developing and children are developing. And for me, in my practice, I am going to be an upper cervical specific, but I will be making sure that I monitor all of these different, the status of their nervous system.
Absolutely.
And we can do that. What are some red flags that you see in your patients that kind of show that there's an issue in the neurodevelopment or their milestones or any in that area?
Well, first off, you're absolutely right. In my teaching programs, I always stress that as chiropractors, we see these kiddos more frequently than the pediatrician. So especially in that first year or two of life, we need to understand if they're not showing and demonstrating certain motor functions, how imperative that is. So one right off the bat is tummy time. Tummy time is huge. So if I have a child, an infant, that doesn't like tummy time, there's a few red flags going off in my head. I want to know the integrity of the cranial structures and the upper cervical spine. Mm-hmm. You being an upper cervical practitioner, the upper cervical spine is amazingly huge in development of the vestibular system. And the vestibular system is the number one head honcho of regulating all sensory systems. And the vestibular system is actually linked with cognitive disorders, with scoliosis, with depression, anxiety. It has straight access to the HPA axis. So that upper cervical spine is huge. So if a child doesn't like tummy time, I'm worried about the upper cervical spine. I'm worried about a Moro reflex that's too active. Mm-hmm. I'm worried about some gastrointestinal issues. Do they have some GERD or reflex issues going on? A baby that is in a fight or flight stress mode all the time, oftentimes the stomach acid is too low. When we have too low stomach acid, we get that reflex. One thing that just it is so disturbing to me is these babies being put on Miralax for constipation and antacids for reflux. Absolutely, there's no reason that should be happening. They should be getting adjusted. All vagal tone. So those are some things that I want to look for if they don't like tummy time. And tummy time is going to be so important in developing vestibular and proprioceptive function and understanding where one is in space. It's going to be huge in the visual system development. So tummy time's right off the bat, one of them. Then I look, another one is they're rolling in a corkscrew fashion, not as a log, but actually in a corkscrew type fashion. At 3 months of age, its pelvis starts first and they roll in a corkscrew fashion through the thoracics into the shoulders. At 6 months, it's the opposite. They start with the shoulders and roll downward. And then absolutely creeping and crawling. You've got to have those.
Yeah, those are all really important, red flags. And so in these red flags, I know that because I've been reading Disconnected Babies lately, and he was saying, Dr. Melillo, in a lot of children with neurodevelopmental issues and like autism spectrum, the proprioception is a really big issue with them. And so this, you saying the tummy time and relating to the upper cervical, relating to proprioception, and the cranials and all that can have a really big impact if you can really see those red flags and monitor and maybe get a kid adjusted early and have that nervous system and proprioception be taken care of more so.
We should be the cornerstone, of early intervention. Chiropractic should be the cornerstone of early intervention. And the proprioceptive system is imperative, it's huge, but we can't negate the vestibular system. And when I'm out there in Atlanta with you guys, we're going to hammer the vestibular system.
Good. I'm excited for that. We need some neurology, some really good science in there. to help all of our students and docs really take care of children. So seeing the child and seeing these red flags is one thing, and a lot of times those are very apparent. Sometimes they're not, but when you're talking to the parents, what are some key history questions that you kind of go over to get a little bit more information specifically towards children that can't speak or, early on?
Oh, you're on these. You got it. These are great questions. Here's the deal. We have to find out the health and emotional status of the parents. We want to find out what the stress load was of both parents, especially the mom. In the first 2 trimesters, the baby is feeding off mom's adrenals. And then in the last trimester, mom actually feeds off a baby's adrenals. So I want a good history. How was her pregnancy? Were they very stressed out? Did they do a lot of moving? Was the relationship okay? Were they working and going to school? Get a really good history. I want a good history of mom's gut. Okay? I want to see what her microbiome is, and because the baby is going to inherit the mom's microbiome. And we know now there's a brain gut and a gut brain connection. It's all tied together with the vagus nerve. So I want to know what her history is. I want to know, does she have antibiotics? I want to know, was she a couch potato? I want to know if the baby moved a lot, because the vestibular system is going to rely on movement from the mom and be able to move in utero. If you have a breech presentation or in utero constraint and that mom wasn't being adjusted, there's a good chance that the vestibular system was not mature. So those are some red flags. Everything that I want a history on with a child, I also want the same history with the parents. So I can see if there's any epigenetic pull down that I need to deal with.
That's a really interesting point with the vestibular system with the in utero constraint. That's something that is very, it should be very, what's the word I'm looking for? Plain. I should have made that connection immediately. But you saying that just turned a light bulb. I hadn't really even thought about that as an issue before.
It's just one key pearl, and that's how we learn and grow and get better in practice. It can be one key pearl that changes a big way, changes the future a big way.
For sure. So let's see. We talked about some history. We talked about some red flags. Let's say the mom in the history. What are some ways that let's say she was a couch potato. How do I tell the mom, hey, you need to get up and move? In relation to her baby. Obviously, everyone knows they need to exercise, they need to eat right. But still, nobody does. So what could I say to the mother, a pregnant mom, or even a mom to be, about moving during pregnancy and how that would help her baby?
I always explain the importance of the sensory motor functions and the vestibular system being kind of the air traffic controller over all sensory systems. And if a child struggles with the connection between the body and the brain and the brain and the body, especially in regards to vestibular and proprioceptive function, that can later on lead to a variety of health struggles, attention issues, learning, and as we're going to learn in Atlanta in October, even mental health. So I explain that to them, and I explain that the baby is going to develop this nervous system, this vestibular system, while in utero, while developing, and that's going to take place by her movement. So I need her to get her booty moving a little bit, even if it's walking 15 to 20 minutes a day. And if they have a desk job, to drink a lot of water, so it makes them get up and have to walk to the bathroom. And it's going to be really important that we monitor her pelvic and lumbar structures so that baby, and I show them on the spine, and you can even use the analogy, you can use like a basketball net, and get a basketball net in your office and show them the basketball net has a torsion in it, and I try to put that ball through the net, it's not going to come out, right? So if her pelvis has torsion in it, the baby as it's developing might have a hard time moving, and this vestibular division is going to also depend on movement in utero. So that's why it's so important that we monitor them throughout their pregnancy to make sure that everything's balanced.
Yeah, that the Webster protocol is really great, great stuff. Everybody, doula, midwives, and the other professions all really know that term, and it's really great that the in-utero constraint and the pelvis movement is really becoming a little bit more mainstream.
And now we know. Now you know it's not just for a good delivery process. It's also good for good neural development.
That's amazing. So just a couple of more things. So you have children in your office, and some kids are super attentive and just jump right on the table and let you analyze, adjust. And then there's some children who do not do that, do not like that.
It doesn't happen in my practice. I've had chunks of hair pulled out. I've had my nose broken. I got a really bad hit about a month ago and got a concussion, a headbutt. So I don't have the typical higher functioning autistic or ADHD child. I have the ones we have to duck and cover a lot.
Okay.
So, but the good news is things like giving them some proprioceptive input. I do chiropractic on the move a lot with these kiddos because lots of times I'm having to do a lot of deep joint compression. And you can even do it just with the fingers, some flexion and distraction, and with the wrist, and deep bear hugs. We use weighted blankets, a lot of stuffed animals that are weighted, that they like that weight because that proprioception, that deep compression is calming to them. It calms down all the other unwanted sensory chaos that's going on. And that can help you get gold, I say, get the gold, and the gold is the adjustment. So you might have to have a little bit more patience with some of these kiddos and get them to calm and regulate before they'll trust you. You might have to do some cranial work for several visits or several weeks until you gain trust with them to get that adjustment. And I do cranial work on the move. Okay, I might put toys on my pelvic bench that they can play with while I'm standing behind them and I'm moving alongside with them to get some cranial work and even a light adjustment. So you become very creative. But we'll go over some things in October.
Awesome. Well, do you have any other things that you need to get off your chest, things you think that we need to know? There's students and doctors watching us right now. So is there any points that you'd like to make before we shut down for the day?
Oh, there's a lot of them, but I think the biggest one is never, ever give up on a child, no matter how frustrated you are and how hard they might be able to, how hard they are to manage. Understanding where they're coming from in their brain. When they're mean and aggressive and they spit on you and they hit, they are reaching out to you because they're hurting. They're not doing it because they want to be mean. Kids do not want to fail. They don't want to be isolated. They don't want to be out of control. They don't want to be mean. They are expressing so much of they're so sick and they're hurting so badly. So those are the kids that we really need to actually have the most patience with.
That's awesome.
And be one with the child. When you're with kids, kids and animals have an innate ability to pick up on your energy. So especially if you're dealing with these kiddos with neurodevelopmental struggles, they're very in tune. And that means you have to be in tune, and you have to be what I call congruent and clean and sober. You have to eat well, you have to get adjusted, you have to drink a lot of water, you have to get enough sleep. You have to be on and be healthy yourself, because they pick up on that.
For sure. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it.
Hey, it's my pleasure.
I've learned a ton. I'm sure that everybody watching here is learning a lot as well.
Well, I hope so.
So everybody, in 2 weeks, we're going to have our next webcast. Hopefully you will tune in and watch us then. We have a couple of more docs. We haven't decided exactly the lineup yet. Everybody has very busy schedules. So hopefully we'll see you then. And until then, have a great couple of weeks.